All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis, your host here, Eric Kavanagh, and I'm very pleased to have another guest with us today. Timothy Baines is the founder of a company called Compatio, doing really interesting stuff. They've built a whole platform for, you could say, configure, price, quote. Really, it's a platform for managing compatibility, hence the name, of different products. So think electrical engineering or building materials or anytime you need to bring a bunch of big pieces and parts together to create some whole, like think a car, for example, or any kind of complex machinery, you need to know, are these parts compatible? Do they work together? And then understand pricing and be able to figure out what to charge for these things. And they have a whole platform that does that. And they're focused on a couple markets, but they can do all kind of different stuff. But Timothy, what really struck my interest here is you mentioned this taxonomy. And if you would, can you tell us what you mean by a taxonomy and how does that fit into what Compatio does?
Yeah, sure, Eric. So first of all, I think it's important to understand that at the core, at the heart of our system, is essentially a knowledge graph, and that knowledge graph sits on top of a precision taxonomy that within a given industry, let's say electrical switchgear, for example, or industrial automation components, we have a very precise set of categories as far as what components are what, along with very high quality and very carefully engineered attributes on the products, as well as product catalogs for different manufacturers. So together, the taxonomy, which is the categories and the attributes, as well as the rules on what the attributes are allowed to be, what data type, what is the range, or even what is the pick list of values, that comprises the taxonomy. And then that gets hooked up to catalogs of products. And together, those feed into our larger sort of layers of logic that is essentially a knowledge graph.
Yeah, and the reason why that's important for our audience out there listening is that when you have this graph and you have this ontology, you are you are cataloging all these myriad parts of which there can be millions of different ones in such a way as to facilitate the alignment over time. Because if you were to try to manually put those into like a just traditional relational database or something, first of all, it would take forever and a day. And second of all, it would not be performant at all. It would be very, very slow, very painful. So by going this route of having a graph, a knowledge graph substrate with ontologies for particular industries or disciplines, if you will, you're really facilitating the end use of this whole system to allow people to compare and contrast and figure out, do these parts work together or not? That's very, very clever. And you built the graph yourself, or you've populated this graph. Can you talk about some examples of how the graph and the ontologies facilitate what your end users want?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you think about, if you think about any type of product that's available at scale, sort of on a large e-commerce site, let's say, all products need to have effective attribution and descriptions to power search. So that's kind of a fundamental use case. But when we get into more complex verticals, more complex product domains where the attributes, the specifications of the products need to be very, very precise. You need an entirely different level of quality and accuracy on those attributes. And the use cases that powers are things like search, but search including parametric search, right? So you can filter down and find exactly what you want. So
Right.
in kind of discovery, but then the higher order logic that also that enables. In the domains where we operate, the products are complicated. The finding the right product for your specific application, even just a single component, can be non-trivial. And oftentimes you may need to talk with an expert, let's say, that can help you figure out what the right product is. And then if you think about a product that is part of a larger system, an industrial automation system with a motor and a motor controller and a relay and so forth that all need to go together to be able to identify those components, number one, that fit your application, and number two, go together, that's non-trivial. And historically, that task has been handled by experts, folks with 10, 20, 30, 40 years of experience in that industry, and you'd walk to the counter in a distributor, a dealer, a store, or they'd come to your plant and they'd have all the expertise that's needed to help you spec it out. But things are going online. Obviously, digital commerce is expanding. And we also are seeing some fairly significant turnover in the industry in terms of the labor force, where a lot of the folks
Interesting.
that came in 20, 30, 40 years ago, they're retiring. They're baby boomers and they're rolling out. And it's what the companies that we're working with are telling us. It's hard to find the right people, and it's hard to train them, and it's hard to retain them. So we see really an emerging and a massive knowledge gap coming into as digital commerce becomes more prominent,
Right.
combined with this problem of expertise. It makes it very difficult to do these kinds of things, to find the right product, fit your application, make sure they go together, and then price them and quote them and get them out the door. So we're addressing all of those use cases.
Yeah, it's really impressive. And when you talk about industrial engineering, the machines that make machines, basically, you have years on these things, different models, and things change year over year. I mean, I'll use the metaphor of an automobile just because most people have an automobile, or at least know someone who has an automobile. And depending upon the year of that make, you'll get different parts for different functions, like whether it's to run something in the engine or in the electrical system or whatever. And it really matters to get the right thing. I've been one of those do-it-yourselfers. I bought some products thinking it was going to fix, and it didn't fit the car. I was like, oh man, because it was the wrong year. So it's really important to have the year right, the make, the model, and then all those attributes you talk about are basically edges on the graph, right? So you're able to capture all that and then maintain some history and thus facilitate finding that one specific part that you need to fix this machine, right?
Yeah, that's right. And taking a car or an automobile as an example, I mean, that data is generally very carefully maintained and curated by the manufacturer of that car. I mean, even some of it is legally required that they maintain that data for many types of things, for example, liability reasons and so forth. But where it gets really interesting is where you, let's say, again, keeping our focus on a car, you get out to what goes on the car or around the car or attaches to the car or accessorizes the car. That data is not maintained by the manufacturer. So when you get into these multi-brand situations, something that goes on or with something else, you're in a space that really nobody owns right now, where nobody owns that data, what
Hmm.
goes with what across brands. And in the industries where we operate, electrical, automation, building materials, and so forth, those problems are everywhere. Everywhere, folks are trying to figure out what goes with what, especially when it's cross brand. But even within a brand, it's still challenging. So yeah, the problem is huge, and the markets are huge. The companies in the industries that have these kinds of issues are huge. We're talking trillions of dollars worth of annual revenues in these industries, and they all suffer from these problems.
Yeah, well, you can just imagine. I mean, I've studied supply chain through SAP and some other companies, and it gets incredibly complicated because some of these companies will have hundreds of thousands, even millions of SKUs. And so, just from a data management and storage perspective, that's difficult. Then enabling search is difficult. Then enabling search for your partners and for your clients, which is also very important because you want them to be able to find the bits and pieces, the products, the component parts they need. And all of that is facilitated by this Compatio platform, right?
That's right. Yeah. Search discovery, compatibility, and configuration.
Mhm. And then, right, once you can search and align and determine compatibility, then you get into things like pricing and configure price quote, which is another huge part of the industry, knowing what you
Yes.
can charge for something, knowing what the margins are that your competitors are putting out in the marketplace, that you're putting out there, finding the balance amongst all those things. I mean, that's a full-time job for people, and you still have to take guesses, right? I mean, you're going to figure out all your prices. You're going to configure and figure, okay, I think I can get this price, and you send it out there, and hopefully they bite, and then you go ahead and go through this, and you have to be able to go back and audit that and report on it and figure out where's the margin because you got to make money, right? Everyone has to make money at the end of the day. So you're helping facilitate these transactions. You're helping make sure that companies are getting the parts that they need to get. And you're also, I think, enabling more of that sharpening of the pencil, basically, because once you know what the margins are and once you know what the reliability of the providers are as well, then you can make these informed decisions. Then you can kind of understand where the margin is, and that's kind of how you grow your business. But folks, don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. We're talking with Timothy Baines of Compatio. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis, your host here, Eric Kavanagh, with Timothy Baines of Compatio. He's the founder. And Timothy, we were just talking on the break there about guided selling. And I love this concept. And I think you're going to see more and more of this as time goes by. Can you describe to our audience what you mean when you use that term guided selling?
Sure. Again, traditionally, if you needed to buy something that was more complicated than, say, a T-shirt, you would go to a specialist, somebody in a store, or for a B2B product, a sales agent, a sales executive, application engineer that would help you figure out what you need, just even if it's an individual product. And when you get into systems of components, things that go together, you need to make sure that that system that you're buying, that collection of components, not only do they go together, but they actually meet your needs. They fit the needs of your application. And again, traditionally that's handled by a human and still is in many, many industries. However, digitalization is happening. E-commerce, online, even B2B companies are selling online now, and there's an expertise gap. There's a huge gap in terms of being able to help guide a customer in a self-service fashion through to the right component, and even more difficulty is in guiding them to the right system. So guided selling is actually a combination. So recommendation has been around for a long time. Everybody has probably seen a recommender. You're on Amazon and they say, you're buying this computer mouse. Do you want a mouse pad to go with it? Or other people bought this stuff. Those are recommenders running. Recommenders such as used in even at Amazon, they typically don't have the internal knowledge of what a configurator has, which is what we have. So we can cross-sell, make recommendations over what goes with what, even if the product is very, very complicated, very, very technical. But then you take recommender capability. So the ability to discover what the customer actually wants and to recommend things to them. And then you put that in front of a configurator and you have a new process called discover to configure, or shorthanded guided selling. We ask a bunch of questions. We function like an expert. I mean, the platform asks questions, functioning like an expert. What are you trying to do? Where do you want to go today? Where do you want to fish? What do you want to fish for? Where do you want to ride your bike? What are the voltage requirements on your automation system? Whatever. They ask those questions, and then that sort of guides you to a filtered space of products that actually might work for you, and then configuration can take over and help you build the system that you actually need to buy. So it's a discover to configure flow that culminates in essentially a quote for a complex system. And now when you talk about CPQ, or configure price quote, you're in the realm of traditional CPQ systems, but we hook all this guided selling, advanced recommendation capability up to the front end of it, and then we deploy it at scale on very large e-commerce sites, which is what the CPQ systems don't do.
Yeah, that's really, really cool because especially again in industrial manufacturing, in building materials, even in any number of industries, it's really important that you get all the appropriate parts. And so the recommendation can say, I want to build X widget and I'm going to use 5 different components, and it'll tell you, hey, you need the 6th component because without the 6th component,
Yeah.
the whole thing isn't going to work. And to your point, if you don't know from experience that you needed that 6th part component part, you're going to go ahead and buy the 5 and be very frustrated. And think about the
Exactly.
lost time, the lost morale, lost margin, like all this stuff falls apart. That's why I know how serious it is, because in manufacturing, you have this whole supply chain of stuff that has to come in here at a certain time. You have to be able to put it somewhere, get it into the assembly line, make sure it all comes out the other end. And it's just amazing how that stuff works. So the more time you can save, the more assurance you can get that you have what you need to get the job done. That's a huge selling point for Compatio, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And to that, I'll add the cost of returns and rework. If it's a build to
Right.
order, a configuration, a build to order component or a product, you have to get it right, or you're going to have rework and a very unhappy
Right.
customer and maybe a very expensive situation. And even
That's
in
right.
digital commerce, I mean, the cost of returns can be 12 to 20% of your revenue, right? So if you can get it right at the point of sale the first time, and make sure that the customer buys stuff that actually goes together. I mean, how many times have you brought a product home and realized it didn't work because
Right.
it didn't fit with something you already had?
Right.
Could be a PC component, could be anything. So that cost of returns is a big problem as well, not to mention customer satisfaction. So we address all that. Our largest customers, for the products that we recommend, the return rates are almost zero.
Wow. That's a big deal. I mean, just cutting down that return rate is
Yep.
gonna save you money. It's gonna save you all kind of stuff. I learned this lesson the hard way years ago. A friend of mine built me a server, like he just built this box. That was a super powerful box, and I wanted to get some card for it, and I got the wrong card. It's like it doesn't fit. You're like, oh, geez. And
Exactly.
that's just on an individual level. You multiply that out on a corporation with tens of thousands of products they need to assemble, and that's a huge, huge nightmare. So Compatio, Compatio, is it compatio.com? Is that right?
It's compatio.ai.
Compatio.ai. Well, Timothy, congratulations on building this platform. This is a pretty seriously big deal, and you're really greasing the tracks. And I love that you got a taxonomy or taxonomies, ontologies, basically, and a knowledge graph. That's the way to do it. That's what our audience loves to hear about. So thanks for your time today. Look these folks up online. Ladies and gentlemen, Compatio.ai and Timothy Baines. We'll talk to you next time. You've been listening to Inside Analysis.
Thanks, sir.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back to Inside Analysis. In our first segment, we heard an interview with Compatio. And now for our next couple of segments, I'm really just going to do some commentary on what's happening in the industry at large. And just the other day, I gave a presentation for Insight Jam on preparing for the AI overthrow. So I'm going to share some thoughts from that. And really, what I was talking about is what is happening with all this Gen AI stuff and other foundational models, other AI technologies, which have been around for years and years. And the first question I ask people when they are talking about Gen AI is, which part of your business can be wrong 20% of the time? Which part of your business could be wrong 10% of the time? I ask that because remember, foundational models, these new Gen AI models in particular, are probabilistic in nature, which means they are not deterministic. And the reason for that is because a Gen AI model will take text or imagery, then convert it into numeric values, vectors in particular, and then convert those back to text and images based upon prompts. So that is a lossy process. If anyone has seen the TV show Silicon Valley, which I just started watching recently. It's hysterical. It's all about the lossless compression algorithm. It's this amazing algorithm that allows you to get your data as fast as you can imagine, no matter where it is, no matter how big it is, all that kind of fun stuff. But it's lossless. This is a TV show, okay? So it's a bit of a fantasy. In reality, these Gen AI engines are not lossless. You will lose fidelity going from text or image to vectors and then back to text or images. So, what does that mean? Well, it means you have to be careful how you use these things. Now, in decision support, that's great. Decision support doesn't have to be right all the time. It's just giving you ideas, it's giving you some perspective, some insight perhaps into your business, what's going on, what you can do about it. But you still get to choose what to do. And that is the key. And frankly, I think that overall, the value of AI will be manifested in the form of suggestions. So you're going to have AI engines giving you ideas saying, hey, have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? Think about customer support, for example, and customer service. Somebody at a call center, a worker at a call center has someone on the phone. A good AI engine will bring up that customer's history, will bring up ideas about what to offer this customer based upon their buying patterns, based upon their demographics. And the good call center person can sit there in real time and absorb that information. That is going to be amazing. I mean, it's happening already. It's going to happen a whole heck of a lot more. And here's actually where there is a bit of a tie-in to the Compatio conversation we had at the top of the show. Compatio is all about finding compatibility between specific products, electronics primarily. And what do you want when you work in the world of data and information? You want the right information at the right time. Well, historically, that has been done through integration efforts. A lot of times, ETL, extract, transform, load, or ELT, extract, load, transform. That's one way to get data in. There are message queues, for example. There are all kinds of ways you can do this. Graph databases turn out to be pretty important for being able to bring together lots of different kinds of information as needed based upon conversations with someone at a call center. So, graph is good for that stuff. And what I would suggest is that these new language models are going to be very, very useful in this capacity. Because to do the sort of traditional point to point style integration, it is, first of all, it's a bit hard to set up. It's costly in terms of the time it takes to get it working. If something breaks, then you have to fix it. But what these Gen AI engines can do now is you can feed a vector database with information from all of your systems that matter, like your ERP or your CRM or your clickstream analysis, your support tickets, whatever. You populate your vector database that's part of your RAG architecture you keep hearing about, retrieval augmented generation. You populate your vector database with information from all these systems. You bake in a recency bias, for example, to get the most recent information. And then what happens is that RAG model combined with the large language model winds up delivering to your customer service rep at the call center really good information at the moments it's needed. So you don't have to do the sort of traditional type of integration that has been the mainstay for, gosh, decades now, which again is brittle. It's fairly expensive. It often does run into some issues. Of course, we have observability to help with all that now, but the point is that these new LLMs are going to be incredibly useful for tasks like customer service because they, again, can think about the summarization capabilities of these engines. They're so good at summarizing documents. They're so good at finding little kernels of interesting things to share. And of course, they speak in languages. They speak in English, French, German, pretty much whatever you want. So that is going to be absolutely huge. And then in my presentation preparing for the AI overthrow, I went on to point out that really every last corner of the information workers environment is going to be affected by this, whether you're doing creative tasks like writing press releases or tweets or social shares, if it's administrative work, dotting I's, crossing T's, fact checking. We talked to Amr Awadallah the other day, former Cloudera CTO and co-founder. He's now over at Vectara. And he talked a lot about how they have a very sophisticated model where the last step is a separate model entirely that steps in and gauges the accuracy of what the first model created. So it's QA, basically, it's quality assurance, which is the way to go. That's exactly what you want. You want quality assurance in these protocols, in these functions. And that's what they're doing. So that's going to be a big part of it. Fact checking. It's good at strategic planning. It's good at troubleshooting. It's good at analyzing data. I look at the analytics industry and wonder to myself, how are these standalone analytics vendors going to survive? You think like a Teradata or an Alteryx or a Tableau or any number of these guys, well, they have huge client bases, obviously, so they're going to be able to survive for a significant period of time, you would think. But I have to believe that the cost structures are going to be collapsing around us as companies figure out ways to get answers to their queries faster and cheaper and articulated in perfect syntax by a large language model, that's going to have an impact on the cost or the price that you can charge for a data warehouse, for example. Snowflake has already thrown down the gauntlet to Teradata in that sense, and even Snowflake is facing some pressure now. So there are just crazy things happening, folks. I mean, these LLMs, they're also very good at writing code, but they're not gonna get you all the way there. Typically, it's gonna get you 80% of the way there, and then you have to fine-tune the rest. Well, that is gonna be fantastic for innovation. Frankly, we're entering a period of what I would call hyper innovation, hyper acceleration. You're gonna see it all over the place. The companies that really roll up their sleeves and focus on using these technologies to optimize their own workflow and the workflow of their employees, they're just gonna crush the competition who doesn't. This is gonna be huge. It's gonna be a very, very, very big deal. And, just to throw out some other bold projections here and predictions for 2025 and beyond, I said in my presentation the other day, AI justice for all. I would argue in the future, you're going to have the option of choosing an AI judge and or jury, at least for civil court. And then what you'll do, let's say you sue somebody, you both choose to go the civil court route, but you use the AI engine. What you're going to do is load all of your documentation, load your case, your lawsuit into a folder, and you're going to use that to go through the whole process. And then what's gonna happen is then you give your testimony, you're gonna turn the camera on, and you're gonna answer questions. Think about it, these LLMs come up with questions for you. So in the case of some civil suit, the AI is just gonna spin up a whole bunch of questions and ask you, "Well, where were you? What happened? Why did you do this? How did this happen? How did that happen? What did you do first?" All these kinds of questions the engines are gonna ask the plaintiff and the defendant, and you're gonna give a whole bunch of testimony, and then you're gonna finally hit the end button, and it's gonna go brrrp, and it's gonna analyze all the data and render its decision. And I predict that you will see this in civil courts fairly soon because they're so backlogged. Sometimes it takes 2, 3, 4, 5 years before a case actually comes to court because there are so many cases, and these folks cannot simply get through all these cases. The people who work for the courthouses, the judges, the juries, that whole process is incredibly slow, incredibly cumbersome, and it's a real pain. And, the other thing that you can do, think about digital twins. Well, you could even create digital twins for particular environments like Cook County, Chicago, for example. If that's what you want to do, you would have the AI create personas for people that live in Cook County based upon real people, based upon Facebook posts or Instagram posts or LinkedIn posts or wherever you can scrape information about personalities, these AI engines, I promise you, they're going to create personas for judges and for juries. And then you're going to have this whole AI infused world where all that stuff gets cranked out. And you could go through cases at a pace probably 100 times faster than what we're seeing today. And what I predict is that again, you'll have the choice. You don't have to go with the AI judge and or jury, but you're probably going to want to, at least if you're innocent or you have a good case. Now, if you're guilty and you don't have a good case, then I'd recommend going the person route because it takes a lot longer. Human beings are very subjective in how they view things. They can be swayed easily. I don't think these AI algorithms are going to be swayed so easily. I think they're going to do a fairly objective job at looking at the facts, looking at the information. And think about this, they can also, if you get access, let's say you find a way to give access to your cell phone records by API to one of these AI judges or juries. I mean, things are going to get crazy. It's kind of what I'm suggesting here. It's going to be wild. And you're going to see AI engines moving into just about every corner of our world that we have today. And you'll also have transparency. It'll come out when it gives its judgment. It'll say, I gave you this judgment based upon its similarity to this case, this precedent that has existed. You're going to have these engines get access to all of the cases in the past, and they'll be able to find relevant cases. It's just going to be nuts. You're going to have AI lawyers, I predict, to be able to help you sort through things. And then to just think about the procedural side of lawsuits. That's the hardest part is all the procedure, knowing when to file this motion or that motion, what it'll do, what's allowed, what's expected, what is the norm, what would this judge do, what would that judge do? I heard a a story from a friend of mine who said there was some app that said something like never pay a ticket again. And it was an app that basically told you what to say when going into a courtroom based upon its information about individual judges and locations and counties around the country. And apparently it was extremely powerful. It worked extremely well. And then every bar association in the country sued to have it blocked. Right? Because they realized this. Think about the Screen Actors Guild and how there was this whole row about Gen AI and using Gen AI. And I mean, you see this everywhere. There's a huge row because the Actors Guild did not want Gen AI to be used to write scripts or screenplays for movies, for plays, for other creative content because they want to protect their members who are people. Well, how long is that going to last? How are you going to stop it? How do you know what was generated with Gen AI and what wasn't? It's going to be very, very difficult to figure out. Now, there is some talk about watermarks, for example, for images and deep fakes and things of this nature. But again, the cat is out of the bag, folks. The cat is way, way, way out of the bag right now, and it's not going in the bag, like basically. So you're going to see these AI engines just encroach into every part of the business world. And I think by and large, it's going to be good, but it is going to be highly disruptive. And we're really going to have to take a hard look at our business processes to understand where AI can fit into the equation, where it should not fit into the equation. I mentioned, 10%, 20% of the time certain things cannot be wrong in your business fulfillment. And I say this because these models are wrong 10 to 20% of the time. That's a pretty big number. Imagine if one in 10 of the one time out of 10 when you order something from Amazon, you get the wrong thing. Well, how long is that going to last? That's not going to work. You're not going to want to keep buying from Amazon if every 10th time you get something that's not what you ordered. It's not going to be good. So there are going to be many, many places for deterministic software, just as we've had for years. It's not going to take over everything, this Gen AI stuff, but it is so compelling. It is so easy to use. It is so interesting and so functional that you're going to have it everywhere. You just have to know where, when, and how to use it and what kind of guardrails to put in place. So I've mentioned Vectara. They have a guardrail which is baked into the end of the process here. You're going to see a lot more of that. You're going to see one and even two quality assurance steps for some of these use cases just to make sure it's correct. And, the bottom line is how often does it get it right? How often does it do things properly? Well, folks, I'm going to talk about my other big prediction in the next segment here. If you want to be on the show, send me an email, info@insideanalysis.com. That comes straight to me. We'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis, a fun episode with an interview with Compatio to start, and then some thoughts from yours truly about AI and analytics and data and where everything's going. And one of the other predictions I've made, which I think is a bit startling, is that before too long, maybe it's a year, maybe it's 3, 4 years, it's hard to say exactly how long it'll take. But with agentic AI, and that of course refers to AI agents really coming to the fore, I think you're going to see something truly amazing. So think about how now you can build a website in almost no time. I mean, in like, if you go quickly in like 20, 30 minutes, you can spin up a website. GoDaddy has a very nice engine that they offer you for building sites. You just give it text, you choose a template, and before you know it, like within 20 minutes to an hour, or maybe two, if you really think about the copy, you've got yourself a website. That's a big deal. It used to take weeks, even months to build websites. You had to go hire people. Now you're just banging out yourself and like literally inside of an hour. Well, let's think about what is going to happen as we expand that sort of AI infused capabilities into other domains. Well, I tell you, here's my prediction. Before too long, you're going to have an engine or actually several of them to choose from. You get one from Amazon, Microsoft, you'll get one from Google, probably other major players of a turnkey technology business solution where what you'll do is you'll choose your business type. Let's say you're a retailer or an ad agency, something like that. You'll answer a few questions about your style. You'll enter your credit card. You'll upload maybe an email database that you have, and then it'll spin up a business for you. And I'm talking every last little detail, including registering you with a particular county or a Delaware corporation, for example, including connecting to other services. And I think a lot of this will all get baked into these cloud platforms. So you think right now we use eye contact. In the past, I've used constant contact. We use a bunch of other tools for social media orchestration. I think the big box vendors like Google, Amazon, Microsoft, they're all going to deliver these solutions that'll allow you to spin up a whole new business model inside of a day or maybe even less than a day. And what I mean is, it's going to just start taking your ideas, mapping out a schema, a business plan, a sort of de facto business plan, and then it'll just start prompting you to do things. Let's say you're a public relations firm. It will reach out through various solutions like Seamless, which we use to find key reporters and journalists who cover your particular space or influencers. It'll give you language to use to reach out to them, to get them into your network. And you'll just be approving stuff or modifying things. You'll be curating, basically, curating tasks that are what you would do to run a business. But the point is, these engines are going to spin up the tasks for you, and then you'll just be allowed to either edit things, disapprove, or approve. And that's what you'll do to run your business. So you just jump in and start banging around. Think about like in a retail operation to put up a storefront to start selling products. Well, a lot of that stuff is just drop shipped anyway these days. You don't often have to go and build your own warehouse. That's what Amazon is for in the first place, a whole warehousing service. So whatever it is that you do, you'll be able to spin up not just a website in almost no time. You'll be able to spin up the bones of a business and start transacting business by reacting to all the different things that the engine shows you. And I think, I'll give you a couple examples to show how that's already happening. And this is before the Gen AI models came out. I ran into a company called Vanilla Soft, and it was fascinating. What they do is they connect to your CRM and your ERP and your Salesforce and maybe your clickstream analysis, whatever your different go-to-market software technologies are. You'll connect up to those, and VanillaSoft sits on top of all that, and then it tells the salesperson who to contact next. So if you think about sales, typically the salesperson sort of cherry picks what they want to work on. Well, maybe I'll reach out to this person, I'll reach out to that person, I'll do this, I'll do that. VanillaSoft turned that entire model around where the engine tells them who to call next. Now, why that's important is because thanks to all these feelers they have into your clickstream analysis, your website, your CRM, your Salesforce, etc., it'll notice, hey, we've got 10 people from General Electric on the site right now searching for this kind of product. So basically, the system will say, call GE next because we know there's activity. We know they're interested in the product. I can tell you, I've been doing tracked email marketing for 25 years now. It's kind of hard to believe it's been that long, but I remember the earliest days of being able to see who opened emails and who clicked on things. So if you send an email out to 1,000 people and 150 people open it and 20 people click on stuff, that's the 20 people you should call. Don't call the people who didn't open it or click on it. Call the people who clicked, who demonstrated interest. Sales in particular is a discipline largely driven by morale and data. When you have good data, you know who to call, when to call them, what to talk to them about. Remember what we talked about with customer service, how these AI engines fueled by large language models will be able to make all kinds of suggestions to you. Say hello to the wife and kids. The kid's name is Luke. The daughter's name is Allison, for example. It'll just pull that stuff from these repositories of information while you're talking to someone. And these days, too, the sentiment analysis that's possible is just amazing. I'm sure you've seen using Read AI or Otter Notes or any of these other sort of note taking services that we've got out these days. They capture all the details of your meetings. Well, imagine how powerful that is. Imagine an organization that figures out how to stack up all of those reviews such that directors can read highlights of all the managers' meetings, and VPs can read highlights of all the directors' meetings, and the C-suite can read highlights of all the VPs' meetings. Now you're really getting somewhere. Now you're on top of what's happening. And this is where I came up with the idea of the executive cockpit, which I think is a very compelling idea, where basically you, as a senior executive, will have a natural language interface, and the model, and I would suggest possibly taking a small language model, and for a big enough company, deploying it in your data center. So it's your model that is custom to your business. You train it on all your data. So now it understands all that. And from a decision support perspective, that means the executives can just sit around and ask questions all day long. How are we doing on marketing? How are we to plan? Where is our funnel? Do we need to get more marketing people involved? Do we need to get more salespeople? Which salespeople are doing the best job? Who should I put on this particular project? Which employees work well together? Which employees don't work well together? You can ask all these questions and you'll be getting answers based upon information in the system. Folks, that's just crazy. I mean, we're talking about revolutionizing how business gets done. And it's going to be off the charts. It's going to be so much different from the way we've done things historically over the past, gosh, thousands of years, even just the past 50 years in American business. Yes, we've used analytics, we've used data warehousing, we've used these various technologies, but largely in an offline, bespoke kind of way, as opposed to an online connected programmatic kind of way. And that is where the real magic is going to start happening. So, we talked about this when I worked for Damon Consulting in Austin, Texas 24 years ago. We talked about closing the loop. And that means leveraging the insights from data, from data warehousing or data science, to operationalize improvements. So, not just getting insights that you can then manually put into your business. No, like literally plugging all that insight into the operations of your business so that they change how you act. And when I talk about the turnkey business, that's kind of what we're talking about. We're talking about being able to modify when we send out emails, who we send emails to, how we use our social media platforms, which vendors we choose to contract with, which people we choose to hire, how much we should pay people, how much we should charge for our services. All of these things can be very dynamically changing as markets change. I saw someone doing really cool stuff where they've connected end to end these kinds of solutions for marketing, noticing when inventory is high for a particular product and you have to start moving product. You get alerts to that. It automatically triggers email marketing campaigns, social marketing campaigns. You just show up to work and approve them or edit them or curate them or disapprove them. And of course, the model learns over time too. So it notices when things happen and they get better, when things happen and they get worse. My point is that we're going to have such an immersive analytical experience going forward in business. This stuff is going to be everywhere. Automation is going to be everywhere. Automation of automation, for crying out loud. Now, you always want to have a kill switch. You always want to have an off switch to be careful about not letting things go too far. But folks, I'm telling you, it's a brave new world out there. And if you want to be on the show, send me an email, info@insideanalysis.com. That comes straight to me. We'd love to get you on the show, have you share your vision with the world out there. And we'll talk to you next time, folks. You've been listening to Inside Analysis.